Hello, Tracy Daly, chapter 26, and we're just going to go straight into it. It was a vicious circle. The amount Franklin was drinking might not have been the cause of his hands shaking, or the hand wringing which seemed to be a telltale sign of less medication in his system. However, the sheer quantities that he drank could surely kill him, and from everything I knew about alcohol, it was a huge depressive, which, to be fair, would just make the negative thoughts he had already 10 times worse. But hey, I was no doctor. Somewhere around the 5th day, Franklin took a huge turn for the worse. I'd done a shop run and had to go back because MJ hadn't signed a prescription for Simontal and Valium. As I'd popped home, I noticed Franklin was sat up watching TV. He was wide awake, but he sat stock still staring straight ahead, which was totally unusual for Franklin. He always seemed to have some kind of rocking or head bobbing going on. That was his character. Something wasn't right. It was as though his energy had dwindled to be replaced by something else, like trying to hide when you've drank too much, but it wasn't booze causing the problem this time. Keep an eye on him, I told MJ as I closed the door behind me. I returned about 45 minutes later to find Franklin sat with his head in his hands and MJ sat beside him. "Right, guys," I said, doing a Mr. Happy with a massive grin and shoulder swing. The curtains were closed and Franklin's pale features shone like a slither of sunlight through black curtains as he sat on the deep red leather sofa. It was so light it barely moved under his weight. MJ, however, looked like she was sat on a barrel of cherries as the sofa pushed up around her frame. Franklin ignored me as MJ answered for both of them. Yeah, Franklin was saying he didn't feel very well, but that he'd be fine. Her eyes told me she was worried about him, but then she was always worried about something. I grabbed a can of Coke each from the fridge and handed them round. As Franklin took his, I realised why he'd been covering his face. He'd had a shave, he'd taken off too many layers of skin. It was red, and he'd been bleeding. "Shit, mate, what you done to yourself?" I asked without thinking. "I'm okay, Tracy. Accident," he said, coldly. "Yeah, okay, mate. Mind if I take a look?" I said, kneeling down in front of him, so I didn't appear intimidating. He glanced at MJ and then back at me. "Can you empty the bins for me, MJ?" I asked her, knowing I always emptied the bins, and that Franklin was feeling uncomfortable with MJ there. MJ picked up on my cue and made her way to the kitchen to start hiding the sharps. "It's okay, mate, accidents happen. I just need to have a look to make sure there's nothing in it, or you don't need a hospital or anything, okay?" No hospital, no, he said, waving both hands over my head. I remained motionless. I needed him to trust me, and realised that if I reacted to his outbursts, there's no way he would trust me. I had to remain calm, like everything was perfectly normal. I smiled. "Can I tell you a secret?" I said, looking left as right, as though I was avoiding MJ overhearing. I was starting to figure out how Franklin worked. He didn't care at all about himself, but he did care about others. "You can tell me anything, Tracy. What's the matter? No hospital, though. No," he replied, gingerly tapping his cheek, where the skin must have been super sore, as it bubbled as it tried to heal. "I need to look like a decent guy for MJ. If I don't at least pretend to be checking to make sure you're okay, she'll think I'm a right bastard, and I'll never hear the end of it. So if you let me clear it up with a bowl and some water, she won't give me shit all day. What do you say? You got to help her mate out or what?" MJ cared about nobody apart from herself, but I had phases of really being depressed for no reason, and I was also trying to help with that. She was hard to understand at most times, but my lie had worked, and Franklin let me clean him up. When I'd done, I told him he didn't need stitches, and I thanked him for helping me, and he shook my hand. "You saved me so much bother, you know that," I added, letting go of his hand. I wanted him to feel cared for, not belittled. "My face is okay now, Tracy. Everything will be fine," he said, with his arms wide, cocking his head to one side as he smiled. I wasn't convinced. He leaned forward and touched my nose with his finger. "You're a great friend, Tracy," he said. Then, quick as a flash, he punched himself in the side of the head. I didn't know what to do, and I just let instinct take over and looked through beyond his eyes. I felt I responded with fear or anger I'd make him worse. Thankfully, I didn't need to say anything. "I'm sorry, Tracy. Don't know why I did that," he said. "It's your face, mate, not mine. I'm a northerner and I've got an hard head," I said. I aimed for funny, but it landed somewhere closer to less serious. I laughed to hammer home that it was a joke, which just made me look more nervous. "Why are you worried, Tracy? I not hurt anyone. I don't even hurt ants," he said. "I know, Franklin. I just worry. It's been scientifically proven Southerners have a softer skull, and I don't want you to hurt yourself, mate. He didn't appear to understand the humour. It has? Is that why my face hurts? He replied. Well, yeah, that, and you just punch yourself in the head, mate. He did it again, this time twice in quick succession. No, Tracy. No, I didn't, he said as he hit himself. Again, twice in quick succession. I realised he was trying to knock out the voices. If they're bugging you, mate, just tell them to fuck off, I said. I was still sat beside him on the sofa. He looked at me like it was the scariest thing in the world to tell them to fuck off. They don't like you, Tracy. You don't know. That's okay, mate. Sometimes I don't like me either, I said. You don't know what they say, he said, sitting down and hitting himself again before he attempted to make a roll-up. He'd given me an idea. Let me grab my smokes, mate. I'll make us one each, I said, heading to the bedroom. MJ was on the computer talking to some guy on an internet chat room on AOL. I didn't have time to care. Go to Paul's, make sure you come to the living room and say Peter has called and he needs PC help. Then go over there and call Paula and get her to sort his key worker or something. He needs help and he needs it today, I said, turning to leave. As MJ shouted, Wait! I looked back, trying to keep one eye on MJ and one on Franklin while I stood in the doorway. What if MJ gave me a torrent of ridiculous events which might or might not occur, which were only designed to prevent her from getting off her arse and helping? What if Paul won't help? I'm trapped in the hall outside panicking. I am agoraphobic, you know. Why can he have your help and I can't? What if Paul doesn't care either? What if I go out and you and Franklin change the locks? I stepped back into the bedroom. I don't have time for this bullshit. Do it and do it now, I said before walking out of the room back to Franklin, popping Mr. Happy back on my face. I come bearing gifts, I said, standing like Jesus in the doorway, with tobacco in one hand and a bottle of mineral water in the other. All the while Franklin sat there punching himself in the head, and my girlfriend sat in the bedroom flapping about taking the 4 steps across the hall. I wasn't sure who was crazier, her, him, or me. It felt good to be able to help someone for a change, but I was scared too. I didn't want Franklin hurting himself or flipping out on us, which was another reason to send MJ over to Paul's place. Halfway through my smoke, MJ came into the living room. Paul called, needs me to fix PC, won't be long, she rattled off with no emotion in her voice. She was out the door before either of us could respond. I looked at Franklin. Women, I said. He laughed and then smacked himself in the jaw. I heard it rattle. Anything I can do to help, mate? I asked him as I sat next to him. I was leaning forwards towards the small green marble table in front of me so I could see what he was doing. No, they don't like you. They say bad things, he answered. Yeah, fuck them. I don't care about them. I care about you, I told him, smiling. You'll kill me. You'll send me to hospital, he said, looking at his roll-up. I turned to face him on the sofa and he looked up at me. Promise you now, mate, nobody's going to hospital. I promise you that, and well, let's face it, it'd be pretty dumb for me to do that, wouldn't it? If you don't want to go and we send you to hospital, you go home and you just ask us to leave. I said it losing the smile for effect, and so that he knew I was 100% serious. I could tell he didn't believe me. It was time to throw a little guilt in. Can't send you to hospital, mate. If you did come out and ask MJ to leave, it would kill her. She's agoraphobic and she gets scared really easily. She acts tough, but she isn't underneath, mate. Tracy, I trust you. It's them, he said, thudding his cheek with a bony knuckle. I took his hand. Please don't, mate. It won't hurt them. It will hurt you. By hitting yourself, then, well, they win, don't they? We sat repeating this process for at least half an hour. Franklin hit himself, and me trying to stop him. I never felt he'd hurt me, but I was always looking for it. There was a knock on the door, and I looked at Franklin like I was surprised and went to answer it. It was Paul. I gave him a look of thanks, figuring he'd know more about how to handle Franklin than I, and so I'd just have to take backseat to his expertise. He walked into the living room, shook his head at Franklin. So you're playing up again, are you? He said, taking his eyes from Franklin and scanning beside the radio where Franklin kept his wallet, change and watch. I could see where this was going. He was a manipulative sort if he could get away with it, and would use Franklin's fear of the hospital against him. Paul obviously thought because I was worried about Franklin I'd go with whatever he said, and so I'd let him manipulate Franklin. Either that or I was turning as paranoid as the rest of them. Either way, the only victim here was Franklin. I wasn't having that. but I needed to see where this went. Paul continued his tale of torment. So you don't want me to tell your mum, and now you've gone and upset MJ, my good friend. Well, you'll just have to behave yourself, won't you? Paul said, taking 2 steps closer to Franklin, and 2 steps closer to the money as well. Simultaneously, Franklin was rocking faster and faster and started tapping his leg wildly. Fuck it, I'd seen enough. Franklin, this is how I deal with irritating voices, mate, I said, leaning in and making sure my shoulder touched his. I wanted him to know I was on his side. I was there for him. Somehow that touch was important. I needed to be more real to him than the voices. I turned to Paul like a stern father. You! I shouted, pointing at Paul. Franklin sat bolt upright beside me. Fuck off! Now! I said, pointing at the door. Paul's jaw dropped, but he didn't move. I stood up and he bolted. It's okay, mate, he's gone, I said, kneeling by Franklin with my arm rested across his knee. Listen, I've got to tell MJ not to ring the hospital, because Paul's an idiot. Okay, mate, I said. I didn't mean to upset MJ, Tracy, I'm sorry. You believe me, don't you? I don't even hurt ants, he said, looking like he was about to cry. I felt so sorry for him. MJ opened Paul's door. Did you call Paula? I asked her as Paul gave me daggers from behind her. Yeah, she's going to call the nurse, she said dismissively. Thanks, he needs his face patched up, and he needs mental help. Paul had walked behind the sofa in the living room, so it was between MJ and him before he piped up. He needs a slap, he's always like this, it's just attention seeking. I ignored him and looked at MJ, pleading, as if asking her to just keep the idiot quiet. She tilted her head and opened the door for me to come in, and I did. Paul looked around at me and then shook his head at MJ before grabbing the phone next to the sofa. I'll just call the police, fuck him, he said. I walked around the sofa and turned the TV off, which was still blaring. What are you doing? I didn't let him finish. Shut up. You're being very unhelpful, I said, putting the phone back in its cradle gently and turning back to him. You're going to stay with MJ until the nurse arrives. You're not going to talk to her. You're not going to bug her. I'll tell you what you're doing from there. If you fuck her around, she will tell me, and I won't be happy. You will not go to see Franklin. I didn't give him a chance to answer. I turned to MJ and pointed at Paul. If this dickhead starts, you call me, and walked out. I had no idea whether what I was doing was right, wrong, or what. In fact, all I did know was that I was more capable of making sensible choices in the best interests of Franklin than either of these two were. So that's what I did. As the evening wore on, Franklin told me tales about the voices and the other episodes he'd had. At first I tried to say they weren't real, and that he was stronger than them. After a few hours of this, I started entertaining the delusions as if it would somehow help. I recall vividly trying to distract him by asking where he'd bought his trainers from. He told me he'd got them from an alien on the planet Mars who charged him 24 rupees for them. After 20 minutes or so of unreality, he'd realised what he'd said or done and then hit himself a few times to try and drive the voices out before repeating the process. By now both cheeks looked like they had tennis balls sewn into them, and I mean literally sewn. He had 2 huge lumps and many red strain marks where he'd punched repeatedly. I'd had a fair few scraps. I had never seen anything like it. On top of the cuts from his razor, this didn't make for a pretty sight. Where the fuck was his key worker? What was Paul up to? I'd talked about his past, my past, our future. I tried everything I could think of, even grabbed a clear quartz crystal point of MJ's and told him inside it was a world where everything was safe. I started describing this wonderful calm world and changing the tone of my voice to replicate that of someone calm and sleepy. It worked for a short while, but every so often he'd give himself a whack. The sun's shining off the water. You can feel the heat travelling through your entire body. Calming, relaxing, getting heavier and heavier. I'd recite it from memory. I'd read it somewhere, and I used it when I needed to sleep but couldn't. He finally calmed down. I had thrown in every symbol of safety, travel, security or warmth and well-being that I could imagine. No danger can come to you while you hold this, I told him, handing him the crystal. It's for you, your special place. It's stronger than anything else, I said, hoping he believed it more than he did the voices. Thank you, Tracy, he said, with no energy. Then he stood up and walked into the kitchen. I followed him 2 steps behind to make sure he was okay. He walked over to the kitchen bin, removed the top and placed it on the kitchen side. Then he undid his trousers, took his penis out and took a piss in the bin. At least he wasn't hitting himself. I watched him go back into the living room, oblivious to what he'd just done, or simply not caring, and then went to the toilet myself, in the bathroom, where I put his razors in my pocket just to be on the safe side. When I came out, Franklin was punching himself in the face, with the clear quartz crystal point between his knuckles. Chapter 27. I was learning to stay calm pretty quickly, even though my mind was going 10 to the dozen. What if he kicked off? What if he hits his jugular vein and bled out? What if he got a lucky punch in, dropped me, and then went to work on me with the razors? I shook it off. It was lack of sleep and dealing with an unusual situation. That was all. It's nothing to worry about. The victim here is Franklin, not me. He needs help. Help him! I was momentarily stuck in the hall whilst my mind went to work, but my body refused. I just said the first thing that came to my head. What's your favourite film, man? I asked him, ignoring the blood running down his cheek where he'd pierced it with the crystal. He must have misheard me. Comedies, he said. I made a mental note to get the crystal back. I stuck one of his blank videos in at random and a woman came on the screen in glasses. She was cute and on her knees. I turned it off and looked for another. Franklin laughed. Sorry mate, you can watch that one when I'm asleep. If MJ comes in and sees that, I'm in trouble, I said, kneeling by the TV. She can join in, he said. And amongst the sleep deprivation, psychosis and emotional hurts, we both creased up laughing. And it felt good. A fat comedian Franklin liked was doing his thing on TV when Franklin hit himself again. I took his hand and shook my head. No mate, that's enough for today. I'd tried everything. I wasn't angry, I really cared about this guy. But if all my nicey stuff wasn't working, it was time for something else. And I was tired. If he went psycho on me, I'd just have to handle it. I knew drug-induced people could be incredibly strong. I had no doubt that Franklin's condition probably gave him the same strength. By this time I'd been on and off sleeping for days, and I'd had no sleep for 2. Paula kept calling the key worker who had been out once and said they couldn't admit him because he didn't want to go and wasn't as bad as some that she'd known about. Then she returned, took one look at him and said she'd sort it and left. She spent 10 minutes with me, telling me I'd done a great job and asking me questions. No, he hadn't done drugs. No, I didn't do drugs. Yes, I was okay. I was just tired. No, I don't drink. Yes, Franklin has drank all them cans and bottles that you see lying around the living room. No, he has hurt himself. Yes, I've got blood on me from stopping him hitting himself. I tried everything I thought Nigel would use and to no avail. It was time to try what I thought Andy would do instead. Franklin trusted me, respected me. It was time to use that. He wouldn't hurt me, would he? I just realised, I said Andy, didn't I? I meant Alan. It was time to try what Alan would. During another part of a fat comedian's speech, Franklin's arm moved again to hit himself. I put my hand on his wrist and held it down. No mate, I said, not looking at him but watching the comedian. Sorry Trace, he said, but immediately tried again. I held his wrist down. I was watching the TV, but I could see him in the reflection of the gas fireplace in front of us. Would he bite me? Punch me? I didn't know, but I had to risk it, or he was seriously going to hurt himself. If I let go, will you please stop? I asked him gently, not looking at him. Yeah, you don't have to hold me, Tracy. I'm not a baby, he replied. I know, mate, but it's for your own good. I let go, and several seconds passed before he lamped himself again. Franklin, you're starting to upset me now. It hurts me when you hurt yourself. I rubbed my cheek. Let's throw a bit of Wenzel guilt in there and see if that helps. It might work. His bullshit got in my head. He hit himself again, and this time I threw myself on the floor and looked at him shocked, as though he'd actually hit me. Shit man, what the fuck? Stop! I said, scrambling to my feet and holding my face before sitting down beside him. He said nothing, and they started to cry. Sorry Tracy, not me, them. Franklin opened another can and downed half of it. I was kind of hoping he'd pass out from the alcohol, but he didn't. I'd already removed his secret stash and told him he'd drank them earlier in the day. He won't remember anyway. I sat back and watched the TV, but kept my hand on Franklin's wrist. He kept trying to force it upwards with pure strength, until in the end, I just moved my hand and let him do it. Where was that fucking nurse? I'd later find out MJ called the nurse who called Paula, who agreed to take him, if it was both warranted and safe to do so. However, because of the blood and crystal, they thought he was a danger, and so were waiting for a riot van with full works to take him to the hospital just in case. I didn't know this at the time. I was sat oblivious with the curtains pulled behind me and a fat comedian in front of me. "Out! Out! Out!" Franklin exploded, punching his head again and again. Little speckles of blood went on his shirt, and on mine. I grabbed both of his wrists and knelt in front of him, this time not fucking around with no eye contact. I looked straight through him. "Let go, Tracy," he said. "No, mate," I replied, as calm as I could. The coffee table had budged over as I'd moved in front of Franklin, and so it was now halfway into the living room, but still stood up. Several empty cans went on the floor. "Let go," he said, trying to flail his arms. "Franklin, stop it," I said calmly. He leaned forwards a little bit, and my defences went up. I was 90% sure he was going to sink his teeth into my nose. "Don't even fucking think about it," I shouted into his face, and started eyeballing. He relaxed immediately. "What?" he asked calmly, as his demeanour suddenly totally changed. I let his wrists go. "I'm here to help you, Franklin. You're a mate. But if you think of biting me again, I'll knock you the fuck out and you'll wake up in hospital. Do you understand?" I didn't take my eyes off his. "I wouldn't. I didn't. Sorry, he said, becoming his usual vulnerable looking shell. He didn't punch himself for the next 10 minutes. Then there was a knock on the door. It was the nurse, and I re-explained everything from the last time she came and the new information since then. Then she quizzed me about my mental health, etc. She saw Franklin and did a half-decent job of hiding the shock from her face at how he looked. Then she sat and had a chat with him whilst he punched himself in the face. I stopped him several times, which the woman said was dangerous, but that I'd done a great job. I wanted to cry with relief that what I was doing was something right, but I couldn't. I had shit to do, and my mind was still partly in Franklin's head, and I knew right now he'd be thinking about what was going to happen next, now the nurse was here, and that would be driving him crazy. Well, crazier. Instead, I told her the hardest two things were stop him hurting himself, and stop him getting inside my head. She asked if I wanted therapy. I told her my father killed my mother. I'd seen worse than this, and I walked away. She said the ambulance wouldn't be long, and that she told everyone he could be a danger to others as well as himself, and so the police would be on hand if required. Inside half an hour there were 2 coppers at the front door in full riot gear. Franklin was terrified, and I could understand why. I asked myself what they were so afraid of, then realised the answer was Franklin, and justified it to myself that not all schizophrenics would hurt people. I hoped I was right. Franklin didn't want the police in the flat and started flapping big time. He was scared they would hurt him. To be fair, I'm northern, and I was scared they'd hurt me, and it wasn't me they were there for. I spoke to the nurse outside and explained. As I did so, one of the coppers said, "We'll bring him down." He was built like a cliff face with the same personality. I turned to the nurse. "No, trust me, I can bring him down. He'll freak out on you guys. He might shout and wave his arms around, but he won't hurt me. Just leave him be until I have him in the ambulance." The nurse agreed, and Rambo informed me if I couldn't get him out, they'd have to come in, and that I'd just get out of the way. I ignored him. I understood his concern, but he wasn't being productive at this time. I told Franklin I was sorry that I couldn't keep my promise. I didn't know that Paul had called the ambulance. That I'd have a word with them, and said that Franklin is fine, but they need to see him in the ambulance. He refused flat out. "No ambulance, no doctor, no police, no. He was terrified. "I won't hit myself, Tracy. I won't, I promise. Tracy, look, I won't hit," he said, close to crying. I didn't know which way was best to go, and so I just blagged it. "Look, mate, I agree with you. These guys are arseholes, aren't they? But I've promised them, me and you will go for a checkup together. So it's either we go together, as friends, or they come and get you." I felt like the parent I'd have wanted all those years ago when I went for that blood test. Just someone to hold my hand and tell me everything was going to be okay, even if it was going to be a pile of shit. Franklin walked out the door with me and down the stairs, past the cops and the nurse with his head down. The staff were pretty good, and as soon as he was in the ambulance, he relaxed. They took him to hospital, and he stayed in for about 2 months. We visited weekly, and we wrote to one another. Whilst he was away, MJ managed to secure private accommodation that would accept social security, known then as the SS. We stayed with Franklin until we could get all of MJ's stuff from her parents and moved into the new flat in Bromley, during which time Franklin had another episode. This time he'd hit his face whilst wearing his glasses, and they'd stuck in near his temple. We weren't aware until the morning when he said he was going for a shave, but he had blood on his face from the glasses. We convinced him to wait for the shave after last time and got straight on the phone to his key worker. This time there was no messing around and an ambulance came to take him. Franklin walked into the ambulance of his own accord with no issues, and I went to the hospital with him. The doctor he saw spoke to me first and then to Franklin. I left him with the doctor, convinced he'd be taken care of. I got home and informed MJ what had happened, and we'd go visit him and sort out getting him some new glasses. I got back to Franklin's to sort out what I was sure would be a can-filled dump, and halfway through clearing everything up and putting the washing on, the door opened and Franklin walked in as though nothing had happened. "You okay, mate?" I asked him. "Yeah, thanks, Tracy," he said, "right as rain." "What's happened, mate? Not being funny, last time I saw you they said you were staying in for a while. Everything okay?" He laughed. "Yeah, I'm fine, Tracy. I told them I was okay, so they let me go." I just nodded. It sounded plausible. I should have expected it. I informed Paula, and she asked us to stay as long as we could rather than go ahead with our move. I explained Franklin needed professional help. As much as I thought the world of both of them, I could only do so much. And I'd do that from my own home, where we're not around Franklin, constantly, and can offer better, clearer help. She thanked us both. 2 days later, Franklin ate his glasses frame. He ate his glasses frame and was admitted to have it removed, and then he was sectioned. We'd moved into our new flat by the time he was released. I did love Franklin like a brother, but there comes a point in time. There's only so much you can do. That's the end of chapter 27. That's what happens when mental health doesn't get taken care of properly. That's what happens when diagnoses aren't made early enough, diagnoses aren't made clear enough. It's what happens when the wrong pills are administered. It's what happens when somebody's not given the right tools and how to communicate with themselves in a positive way, in the right way. And there's a different right way for every person. But I tell you what, the right way of communicating with yourself is not, "I can't do this, I'm useless, I'm not good enough," and all the other negative shit that people who have traumatic histories put on themselves. And people like Franklin, sorry, I changed all the names in the book, sometimes it's hard to remember what names I've called them. People like Franklin communicate with themselves in a negative way. Don't. Everyone has negative niggles. Don't let them grow into something more. You're worth more. You really are. Until next time, I'm Tracy Daly. Take care of yourselves and each other.